Hello, and welcome back to Toledo Aquaponics. It's a rainy day, currently out here on day 13. One of the things I'm looking at is I want to do a quick redesign of my grow beds. One of the issues that I have with grow stone, well, it's not really an issue, it's actually a really nice property, is grow stone, other than being made from glass, actually also floats. Which is nice because it gives a little bit of movement to the grow beds to hopefully move the solids out of the system and out of the beds themselves. However, every time the beds move a little bit, they shift my guard pipe that's around my bell siphon. And so every now and then I start to get small rocks inside the bell siphon area. It'll honestly probably never really be a problem, but I want to kind of redesign them. The other thing is I kind of made these little guards with the 7/16 inch holes just kind of really quickly because I wanted them. However, the guards that I wanted to use a saw and do these little slits. So that way I don't end up with rocks being able to get through the guard, because that's another issue I have, is the really small rocks end up in there. So I'm doing a quick redesign. So what I'm doing is taking 4-inch drain pipe caps and I'm cutting them down in half so they're a little shorter. And then I'm also flattening this side so that way they're a little bit thinner, so that way I can put my bulkheads through them. So I'm putting my bulkheads through this side, have them come out, and then I'm putting the rubber washer on here. So the rubber washer is between this actual cap and the bottom of my bed. So basically it ends up sitting like this. That way I have a socket that I can push my guards into, so that way they're not going to move around, they're nice and rigid, and I don't have to deal with that. As well as, like I said, I'm putting in the redesigned pipes that use slits instead of holes, so I shouldn't end up with any small like stones and whatnot getting into my standpipes. So everything should be nice and uniform. The other thing is I'll probably get a few more caps just to kind of cap that off, because as like plants grow I may end up getting some leaves and debris in there. But if I do, I'm going to probably cut down the caps so they're a little easier to take off. The first grow bed I actually didn't cut down the cap, so the one that's all the way down here, that cap is the same height, which also means the water level has actually been going to be raised. So the minimum water level in the bed is going to be a little bit higher than this. So this is cut down to about half the size. Typically these caps actually went about this high or so. So the water level is going to be at least that high in that bed. So as I go through and do maintenance, I'm going to kind of like watch that on that bed, and I may have to take the whole thing apart and cut down the cap again. However, on this bed here and this bed, I'm going to cut down the caps. So these are going to kind of be clones of each other. I'm also probably not going to change this bed out at all, partly because I already have some plants in it already, as well as I kind of want to just leave this bed alone so I can kind of see what kind of impact I have. I don't know if you can kind of see it in here. I'm going to see if I can get a good picture of it. I don't think you can. Yeah, it doesn't really focus, but you can kind of see there's some of the stones. Some of those are just small enough that they go through the sides. The other ones actually get stuck, slide underneath, because as the beds shift a little bit, they just shift this around a little bit. So this just kind of makes it so it's a lot more rigid. It's not really going to go anywhere, and they can't get it out underneath that. So that's just kind of a quick update on some of the design changes I'm doing to my grow beds. I will also be adding a UV clarifier on my return line from my sump tanks into my fish tank. So I'm going to just mount it to my board and kind of go from there. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm building a couple small hydroponic systems. The first one I built is kind of a Home Depot simple build. It's extremely cheap. It's made with one of their Commander XXL 27-gallon totes. So I just cut a couple small holes in the top, and then this thing is just built out of 3/4 inch PVC, and then I'm using 2-inch PVC for the actual tower itself. So inside here is a Active Aqua 550-gallon pump. I tried using the 160-gallon pump, and it could not pump water up. This is actually about 6 feet when it's done, that the water actually has to go up. So these grow towers are 5 foot long, and then there's about another foot inside of that tote that the water's actually going to move up. So I could probably get away with a different pump, maybe like something like I don't know if they make like a 250 or something in that middle range, but I had a 550 around, so I'm using that. The other thing is I have dogs and they like to chew on stuff. So I have ran the half-inch feed line actually inside that 3/4 inch pipe. So it comes out on the top there, goes to 1/4 inch. This is just kind of like irrigation fittings. And then these run in here. So the water runs constantly through here. So if you, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but the water's constantly moving down. And then these are just little 2-inch Ys with little 2-inch net cups. And they just sit right in there. And so I'm going to use 1.5 inch, probably Rockwool plugs to start seeds in. And then I'm going to put them in here. And then this is probably just going to use sunlight. And I'm just going to use some hydroponic solution just to kind of as a control to go, here's this one growing versus my aquaponics system, and kind of see which ones really outperform each other. The other thing is I'm probably going to build another system, probably similar to that, using the same artificial lighting I'm going to be using in here to also kind of compare that. So I'll have sunlight, artificial light, as well as my aquaponics system completely using artificial light to kind of compare everything to. I also have another set of seedlings starting, seeing I'm going to be expanding my system. This is using a Sun Blaster, I believe. Yeah, Sun Blaster Nanodome. So I have a bunch of seeds started in here. And then this is just using their T5 reflector that comes with this dome. And then these guys are still just kind of moving along. Some of these lettuces are pretty big. And like I said, I transplanted some of those into my system. They're currently just kind of chilling out in here. They're kind of hard to see among all the green algae, which is another thing I'm fixing. I have 2 more bags of grow stone out there that I soaked. As you can see, the reason you want to soak them is basically some of this little glass like powder works itself out. You still end up with some of it getting in your system, but you're going to get that with anything. Any torpous kind of stone, any amount of clay, no matter how hard you wash it, you're always going to end up with some residue in your system. And you're going to have to deal with that eventually. One of the things that's nice is so far, this stuff seems to be pretty heavy. So the stuff that ends up typically gets caught by my swirl filter. So I don't know how well you could see that. But I do have some of that powder down here, and I flushed it out a few times so far. It kind of builds up. It doesn't really come out of my sump tanks too well once it ends up in there, because the sump tanks kind of pull from the middle. So I always end up with a layer kind of in the bottom. I'll see if you can kind of see that. I don't know. Right now the water is kind of murky and turned up because I've been emptying the grow beds, and there's been some of that powder that's been settled in the bottom of the grow beds that I've basically flushed out into the system. Right now, just to kind of show you with my sump tank, this is 3 grow beds worth of water. So I have all 3 of my grow beds drained into here, and my sump tank's not even completely full. Typically under running situations, right now the pump's been off longer than the grow beds have, and I've also supplied some artificial water to kind of, well, not artificial, but other water to kind of trigger the siphon so I can drain the bed. So I've been using the bell siphons to drain them down as low as possible before I pull the drains out. So the water level is a little bit higher than it normally is, but even with the pump running normally, all 4 grow beds can drain into these 2 barrels and not actually cause a problem with my system. And then the 550 gallon active aqua pump that's actually in here will actually pull it out. I currently drain out of this left tank here. I do have another pump sitting in here, but I don't know if you could see it. I also started doing some cable management, but I just have it tied up there. It's basically just there as a reserve in case something goes wrong. I can just grab whatever's in there, I can hook that in to my power line and start draining that one. I also use it to be able to drain this tank a little bit further because, like I've said before, I have about 2 inches or so that sit below this drain here in the bottom that never get drained out by this balancer that's here. So I end up using that one occasionally to drain that out, and then I've been using a little shop vac to get any of the powder residue off the bottom here. I'm just kind of trying to remove that as much as possible. It's really not going to cause too much of a problem with my system. Most of it's just going to be the same inert stuff in here. However, grow stone's made with glass plus basically baking soda. So to basically foam it up, and this stuff's really soft, it's really lightweight. However, I don't want any of that potentially being baking soda and being in my system, so I'm trying to get as much of that out as I can. This is just a little bit longer update than I wanted to do, but this is just kind of an update on my system on day 13. The blackout easies that I have on all my windows are working pretty well. The other thing I added that I didn't talk about is I added a reverse osmosis water filter. This is a Hydrologic Stealth RO 150, and then I also have the booster pump. Mostly because I don't know if I'm actually going to run a water. I don't want to like run a water line to my garage, and I don't really want to leave a hose out through the middle of my yard because my dogs like to chew into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm using the booster pump to kind of suck water in, so I can put right now I just have it pulling out of a bucket as a proof of concept, but I'm actually pulling water out of the bucket. So the bucket's filled up, it pulls out, runs through the same filters, and then it goes to the booster pump before it goes to the RO membrane, which is actually how they recommend you set it up. The booster pump's supposed to go on the outlet of the, well, it's supposed to go to the inlet of the RO membrane, so that way you always have a constant pressure, so that way you're getting your best possible filtration. So it is working. Unfortunately, that little pressure gauge there does not work because I'm not actually running any sort of pressure on that line there, which is the line that goes to the bucket. But so far that's what I'm working. I'm probably actually going to set up a 55-gallon drum for it to suck water out of. And then I have part of that booster pump is actually a pressure switch that's put online, which I don't know if you could see it, but that's actually that black thing right there on the blue line is a pressure switch. So basically when I have that hooked into my top off, that'll be on my swirl filter to just kind of keep my water level kind of neutral. This will only run when there's actually demand for it. So I'm going to probably fill up a 55-gallon drum and let it basically get pulled through there, and then the outlet's just going to go to a drain out here. Basically I just have a low spot in my garage that drains out, and I'm just going to run the outlet to that, so that way all the draining and everything just goes completely out to waste, so I don't have to worry about it. And then I just got to worry about the water level of the 55-gallon drum, which I may work up some water, like an external water level gauge, so I can kind of take a look at that, so I can just kind of glance over and go, oh, I need to top that off. But I really shouldn't. I mean, one 55-gallon drum should last me a while. So that's just kind of the update on my system right now. I am currently just ripping apart my grow beds and kind of refitting them. Like I said, I have this one here refit, as well as this one is. I'm going to finish refitting this one, and I'm probably going to leave this one alone. I am going to top off all the beds with stone, so I may end up transplanting these plants if I want to top this one off, but I haven't quite decided what I want to do. I want to top it off to kind of get away from the algae, but at the same time, I don't know how well that's going to work. Because I don't want to have to I'm going to have to transplant those plants again. Granted, I just transplanted them, so the roots really shouldn't have grabbed onto anything very much. So it should be relatively safe to move them, but I haven't quite decided what I want to do yet. So I'm going to kind of I'll make that decision later and probably be in a follow-up video for tomorrow on what I actually finally decide. But for right now, I'm just doing the refit of the grow beds, just to kind of get those all working nicely. And that way I don't have to worry about any thing long term. Because like I said, short term it's probably fine, but I mean, as you see, even these do get clogged with stone, and the problem is that's restricting water flow. If I get enough of those clogged, I could slow down the drain on the bed. I could long term cause me problems. So this is just a better solution. The only reason I didn't do it initially is because I didn't have the saw. My saw that I'm using to do all this just got in. It just came in yesterday, actually. The rest of it finally came in. So I have a saw sitting out here, just a miter saw out here, that I'm basically doing all my cuts with. Unfortunately, all this pipe here, I don't know if you can see how jagged that is, was all just cut by hand. And so it didn't really work out very well. I tried using a circular saw a few times, and that didn't really work. And none of them really are straight, and I wasn't a fan of it. That's one of the reasons I ordered the miter saw, was so that way I could do nice, even, straight cuts. So this has actually ran over a lot more than I wanted it to. So that's just kind of an update on my system. Currently, nitrates are still high. Nitrates are starting to do a little bit of an uptick. However, the damage I'm doing today may, unfortunately, put me back in square one again. That's one of the reasons I might leave this grow bed alone, because any bacteria in there shouldn't get destroyed by moving around my media. Really, I shouldn't do any serious damage. They should all be pretty decent attached to the media. but I still am potentially doing damage here. Which is one of the reasons I might just leave this bed untouched and maybe just top it off with stone and call it a day. But for right now, I'm just doing the refit. And tomorrow I'll do kind of a follow-up to kind of let everyone know how this all worked out. And kind of as my stuff progresses. I'm also going to lower this grow light, which is right now way too high, and it's been too high for a while. Seeing I now have plants in here, I'm going to lower it to about 12 inches above the plants and kind of run with it from there. Also, I have 2 little doggies that will not leave me alone because it's raining. And they're both relatively afraid of the water. So the one I can't get it to go anywhere near water, so if anyone's got any recommendations on that, let me know. And this one doesn't mind water too much, but she doesn't like storms. So they're just kind of exploring the garage and not leaving me alone while it's raining outside. Alright, again, this is Toledo Aquaponics. Thank you. Bye.